Namaskar. On behalf of India Science and the Department of Science and Technology, I, Nidhi Kumar, extend a very warm welcome to you on this, our inaugural program, the Golden Jubilee Inaugural for the Department of Science and Technology, which is presented by the National Council for Science and Technology, Communications and Vigyan Prasar. भारत विज्ञान विभाग की ओर से हमारे 50 वर्षों के इस उद्घाटन समारोह में आप सभी का हार्दिक स्वागत और अभिनंदन। तमसो मार्ग ज्योतिर्गमय. Let us begin today's auspicious event with the praise of the most benevolent and the most merciful God. O light of exceptional glory, enlighten the darkness of our minds, for dark is the path and thou holdest the light. जैसा कि हम सभी जानते हैं, किसी भी कार्यक्रम का शुभ आरंभ हम दीप प्रज्वलन से करते हैं. I request all our esteemed dignitaries to light the lamp of knowledge.
कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शत्रुबुद्धिविनाशाय दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तुते दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तुते शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः.
And after that absolutely wonderful and euphonious lamp lighting ceremony, thank you so much, sir. Let's talk a little bit of the Department of Science and Technology. This department plays a pivotal role in the promotion of science and technology in the country. The Department of Science and Technology is observing its Golden Jubilee commemoration year during the period 3rd of May 2020 to 2nd of May 2021, with activities like lecture series, huge events, bringing out publications, documentaries, etc. Today, we talk about the vision, the implementation, the coordination and the integration in the areas of science and technology and the milestones achieved so far. This will provide a further fillip to this 50-year-old institution to achieve further grandeur. Today's event is a small celebration of inaugurating the new and small steps that we have taken towards spreading scientific temper in the country. Remembering 50 years of the Department of Science and Technology and what has been its journey, the challenges, the numerous achievements, and the enormous success. But before we begin all of that, we are very privileged to have with us today Dr. Manoj Kumar Pataria, advisor and head of NCSDC. Namaste, sir, and welcome. We request you to share your inspiring thoughts and welcome our guests. To make this occasion come alive in its relevance and importance. We welcome you, sir.
Very good morning, all of you, on this auspicious occasion of Golden Jubilee year of the Department of Science and Technology. Most respected Professor V.S. Ramamurthy ji, most respected Dr. T. Ramasamy ji, most respected Professor Vijay Raghavan ji, who has just joined, most respected Professor Ashutosh Sharma ji, Secretary, Department of Science and Technology, all my colleagues in DST, Vigyan Prasar, all scientific fraternity, inside science, inside DST, outside DST, all fellows, scholars, students, and dear participants. It's my privilege and pleasure to be able to welcome the leaders of science and technology in India and the leaders of the Department of Science and Technology, who have been leading the department for more than 3-4 decades. As I recall, that out of 50 years, something like 3 decades, I have been in DST. And from my experience, I can say with proud, with lot of pride, that सारे जहां से अच्छा DST हमारा, because for one reason, because this organization, though it is small, but offers a very huge impact all around the country and beyond the country. And one important thing I wish to share, that whatever you think, whatever you ideate, you can implement that. So this kind of liberty, this kind of freedom, this department offers, and that really a wonderful attribute of the department. The department is also known for doing science, promotion of doing science, promotion of managing science, as well as promotion of connecting science. It offers a huge connectivity within all cross sections of the society. So, on this note, I once again welcome one and all on this very important occasion when we are organizing, we are starting the DST Golden Jubilee Discourse Series, under which we have planned one panel discussion and one lecture every month. To begin with, today's this panel discussion, where all these luminaries of DST are participating as panelists, moderated by Professor Ashutosh Sharma ji, Secretary, Department of Science and Technology, on remembering 50 years of Department of Science and Technology. With these words, I welcome one and all once again. Thank you. Namaste. Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, sir, for those absolutely inspiring words. जैसा कि आपने कहा, सारे जहां से अच्छा DST हमारा बिल्कुल, और ए वतन वतन मेरे आबाद रहे तू. इसके साथ ही now it is my privilege to welcome our esteemed panelists. It is my pleasure to welcome today Professor Ashutosh Sharma, Secretary, Department of Science and Technology. He is the founding coordinator of the Department of Science and Technology Thematic Unit of Excellence on Soft Nano Fabrication and chairman of Science of Center for Environmental Science. He is the recipient of many awards and honors, including the Infosys Prize in Engineering and Computer Science and the Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Prize. He has helped initiate several new programs related to infrastructure and human capacity building, innovation and startups, R&D in advanced manufacturing, waste processing, clean energy, cyber physical systems, industry, academia, cooperation, science communication, women scientists, and major international collaborations in the areas for the priority of the nation. We welcome you, sir. I now extend a very warm welcome to Professor V.S. Ramamurthy. He was the Secretary of Science, Department of Science and Technology from 1995 to 2006. He is a former director and incumbent emeritus professor of the National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bangalore. He is a former chairman of the Recruitment and Assessment Board of CSIR and has served as a member of the design team of the first nuclear experiment in Pokhran in 1974. He has also been conferred with the Padma Bhushan in 2005. He is a fellow of the Indian National Science Academy and an elected member of the Indian Academy of Sciences. We welcome you, sir. It is now my honor to welcome today amidst us Dr. T. Ramasamy. He is the former Secretary of Indian Science and Technology from 2006 to 2014. He served as the director of the Central Leather Research Institute. He was awarded the Padma Shri for Excellence in Science and Engineering in 2001 and Padma Bhushan in 2014. He was awarded the Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Award, the highest award for science in India for notable and outstanding research in chemical sciences in 1993. बहुत स्वागत आपका sir. We welcome you. It is now my pleasure and privilege to welcome amidst us Dr. K. Vijay Raghavan. He is the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Prime Minister, Government of India. He's also a Fellow of the Royal Society and also a Foreign Associate of the US National Academy of Sciences. He's also a Fellow of the Indian National Science Academy. He was the Secretary DBT from 2013 to 2018. He has also been conferred with the Padma Shri in 2013 by the Government of India and is also a recipient of the Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Award, the highest award for science in India in 1998 for his monumental efforts. We welcome you, sir. आपका स्वागत है. And now it gives me immense delight and privilege to welcome Professor Ashutosh Sharma to share his vision and the milestones achieved so far of the Department of Science and Technology. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, Namaskar. It's so delightful that we are kick-starting this 50th Golden Jubilee consultative series for DST. And so it's a special pleasure and privilege that we have with us today three former secretaries of DST, Dr. V.S. Ramamurthy, Dr. T. Ramaswamy, and Dr. Vijay Raghavan. Among three of them, they cover more than 2 decades of DST's evolution out of 50 years. Unfortunately, Professor Ramarao, who was then the former secretary before Professor Ramamurthy, could not be with us today, but we would get the benefit of his insights and experience and advice on another day. So 50th year is indeed a landmark in any organization's history. Um, and this the establishment of DST was indeed a turning point for science, technology, and innovation in India. Because DST connects with the largest stakeholder base of science technology in the country. That's all the way from school students to PhD to postdoc to young scientists to experienced scientists, R&D labs, universities, IITs, ICERs, colleges, farmers, artisans, women scientists, international connects, and so on. So it's really a very 360-degree connect to the science and technology knowledge ecosystem in the country. And clearly, DST has been built on very deep and solid foundations. And for that, people who have served here, including the leadership that is with us today, have been responsible for that. Um, there have been many great structures that have been established in the last 25 years, even 30 years, and so on. Just to count some of them, Technology Development Board, which is responsible for commercializing indigenous technology by supporting our companies, Inspire program that is a very holistic, a very permeating program which goes all the way from school students to science students to PhD to faculty level as well. So this sets up the entire pipeline, if you would, for science and technology among the most brilliant, the most chosen of our people. And then the Science and Engineering Research Board, which is fashioned after the National Research Foundation of US, about 90% of its structure, processes, architecture. And this has been really transformative because we've been able to reach out to very large number of our scientists and empower them with infrastructure, with human resources, with knowledge, and with connect in order to take our science forward. I just want to quickly share with you, for example, that this empowerment is reflected partially in the fact that the Nature Index report last year ranked India number 3 in the number of scientific publications. Of course, that there have been many changes globally, the winds of change, and the future in science and technology has been coming at us at ever faster and faster rate. Some of those changes are going to be reflected in the Science, Technology, and Innovation Policy 2020, which is under process right now. It's also being driven by the Office of Principal Scientific Advisor, who is with us today, Dr. Vijay Raghavan. So, of course, he continues to aid in the growth of DST today, as well as in the past, that in between he had the additional charge of DST. Um, so, as the times are changing, Um, DST, like all institutions, strikes a balance between the change in continuity, the very solid and deep foundations that we build upon today, all the infrastructure, all the human resources that have built over several decades, over 5 decades, they all continue to aid us even today. They are reflected in the fact that in the times of COVID-19, one were able to activate a lot of this infrastructure and human resources and knowledge base with speed and scale. Um, just to give you an example, we hear a lot about Bharat biotech now developing vaccine. Its success, in fact, its establishment partly was responsible because of the technology development board's support of his original vaccine project. So there are very many stories. There are thousands, tens of thousands of success stories that have been built upon by the schemes, by the programs, by the policies, by the vision and the support obtained through various arms of DST over the years. We have been fortunate that the budget starting 2014-15 and beyond has nearly doubled. What that meant is that we could keep all the deep foundations and build some more on them, keeping in mind the changes which are happening globally. Some of these directions are enhancing our connect of science to technology, developing technology, connecting technology in academia to industry, to MSMEs, to startups. The budget for innovation and startups, for example, has gone up 500% in the last 5 years, basically creating an end-to-end innovation ecosystem, the chain, which caters everything from scouting, mentoring, training, to prototyping, to design, to business model, to seed funding and exit plans. In terms of technology programs, um, is looking at the national priorities in manufacturing, in waste processing, in clean energy, in climate, in environment, and so on. We, of course, have to be clearly future ready. Historically, when we are looking at the future, we are looking at disruptive technologies, we are looking at exponential technologies. India has been a little bit slow in waking up to the potential. And often we may have been a little bit subcritical in our approach to the future. A great example is semiconductor processing, for which we did miss the bus. So there are new programs being seeded. Last year there was a mission on cyber physical systems at an investment of 3,660 crores. A new mission, also championed by PSA and by Niti Aayog, implemented by DST, is on quantum technologies, which was announced in the last budget at an investment of 8,000 crores. Very ambitious mission. All of these missions now would be in a triple helix structure or the mode, which means industry, line ministries, and academia R&D working together in a seamless way from the beginning as equal stakeholders. So I haven't any doubt that many of these technologies of future would take greater root. Another two examples coming up are in electric mobility, electric vehicle technologies, and another program which is started 2015 is National Supercomputing Mission at investment of 4,500 crores. And I'm happy to report that now the supercomputer design and assembling, etc., anything beyond the chip manufacturing is happening in India. Um, there have been several other programs. There have been emphasis on science communication at every level. There have been a new programs in SERB. The budget of SERB has also more than doubled since 2014-15 timeline, so that we are able to keep all the basic science programs and add a few more layers to it. For example, another basic science, applied science program called Supra, which allows people to work on high risk problems, the problems that, if successful, would lead to more profound insights rather than incremental changes. There's another program called Vajra, in which we invite the top scientists and science to India to set up a shop here. We spend 3 months in a year every year, but continue their long distance collaboration as well as continue to co-guide PhD students. We certainly today have the confidence and infrastructure to get the best of science and scientists to India. Unlike, our scientists have been going out for a century now, which is very good, and we bring back all the insights and the structures of science by doing that. But also at the same time, we must also have the reverse process in which the global science and scientists are making deep roots here in India. I would just conclude very quickly by saying that the Survey of India, which is a 252-year-old organization today, has gotten into a new technology mode. So what they are doing now is they are making use of sensors, LiDAR, they are making use of drones, they are doing digital mapping, fully digital mapping with an accuracy resolution of 10 centimeters. And this is going to be transformative for governance, for development, for planning. And it closely ties in with a very compelling scheme announced by Honorable Prime Minister called Samitwa, which means everybody should know what their land holdings are, what are the land records going down to cadastral level, to Gram Panchayat level. And so that would indeed be hugely, hugely transformative for everything that we do in the country. And finally, we all know, I'm very happy to report to all my seniors that the DST building that we have been sitting in, which is more than 50 years old, and it was actually a warehouse for the American grain. Of course, that has been doing well. It has been, remodeled and everything. But now we have the entire new DST campus that should be ready in about 3 months, which would present the modern face of science and technology in India. And all the autonomous institutes of DST around Delhi would all be consolidated here. So I would, will invite all the stakeholders, science, technology, perhaps early next year for a look at the new phase of science, at least in DST, and going forward. So these are some of the things which have been happening in last 6 years. We are indeed will ever be grateful to all the pioneers of DST to got us where we are today, to have this foundation, to have this architecture, to have this great building, the edifice on which we continue to improvise. Sirs, we are indeed very grateful to all three of you who are here with us today. Thank you very much.
बहुत धन्यवाद आपका सर for sharing the roadmap and the futurology of the Department of Science and Technology and the
Nidhi
phenomenal
ji,
vision.
please come in and continue the program.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing the roadmap and the vision and the phenomenal vision that you've laid out for the Department of Science and Technology. मुझे यहाँ एक बात याद आ गई, माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जब कल्पना करते हैं कि विकसित भारत कैसा हो, आपने हमें बता दिया कि विकसित DST कैसा होगा. सर, बहुत धन्यवाद आपका for sharing the transformation and the kind of you also spoke about the hits and misses. Thank you so much, sir. And now request Professor Ramamurthy ji, former director and professor of the National Institute of Advanced Sciences, to take us back across memory lane and enlighten us on what would be your future as you see it, your vision of Department of Science and Technology. Professor Ramamurthy ji.
Thank you, Nidhi. Well, I'm very happy to be here with you all today to share my memories of DST, my days in DST, and also my expectation from the department in the coming years. I entered the portals of DST in mid 1995. As many of you know, that 1990s were very trying times for the country as a whole. We were still under the technology embargo, the 1974 Pokhran leftover, and the opening of the Indian economy in 1991 had put a tremendous pressure on our Indian industries in terms of competitiveness. And there was an apprehension across the country whether we can, in fact, do it. And we had two lessons which we could not forget from our pre 1991 days. Now, pre 1991, we were surviving on reverse engineering, we were surviving on license manufacture and all. We know very well 90s after the opening up, it will not work. But there were still some lessons which were very relevant and which we could not forget. Number one is there is no substitute for individuals, whether they are researchers, whether they are engineers, whether they are technicians. Ultimately, it is the human brain which wins. The second thing is that never have a situation that you give up. The no give up under any circumstance was a motto of those years. So our successes in the denied technologies in nuclear, or whether it is in parallel processing computers, or in several other technology sectors, it was this doggedness which kept the country alive and floating. And we realized that this will continue in the days following the opening of the economy also. The Department of Science and Technology and under my predecessor, Professor Ramarao, were very much aware of this. Ramarao also comes from the defense research segment and has experienced the technology denial regime in person. And he had a roadmap for Department of Science and Technology, which put emphasis on training of people in development of technologies and in taking it forward into the commercial space. My job was cut out. There was already a roadmap, and I had to only follow the roadmap as much as possible, and that's what I did. Some other things were already referred to by Sarmaji. The Science and Engineering Research Council had a major mandate of promoting R&D and promoting researchers in the country to do cutting-edge research. And what we did, some of the things were proven scientists, people with a track record, should be encouraged to move further. And one of the things which I distinctly remember was the Swarna Jayanti fellowships, which were introduced at that time. And in fact, there was one Professor Asutosh Sharma, who was with the first batch of Swarna Jayanti fellowships. And subsequently, I came to know that he was lost somewhere in the jungles of New Delhi. And I was happy to see him again today on the screen. So there are many batches after 1997-98 till today, several groups of people who have been selected and supported. Basic idea is that send out a message, if you deliver, you get supported. And we had the J.C. Bose fellowships for scientists with proven track records. And then we had the Kishore Vaigyanik Yojana for people with in the schools who display the potential to do it. And I'm very glad that after I came out and Ramsamy came in, he said, no, this scale will not do. For this country, it has to be scaled up, and he scaled it up like anything. The program which he put in for the training of young students and carrying it forward is something which is probably the world has never seen that scale in terms of number, in terms of scope, and in terms of the methodologies which were adopted to train them, to nurture them, to mentor them. The whole system was there. So I'm very happy that this is happening. And the other thing which was there is technology development. Professor Sharma already mentioned about the Technology Development Board, which supported Bharat Biotech from scratch to establish Tata Biotech, Bharat Biotech. We got into vaccine development through modern methods only with the support of the Technology Development Board. And today they are competing at the international level. So these seeds were sown at that time, and we are reaping the harvest now. And there are many programs where the Technology Development Board has supported young entrepreneurs. The technology entrepreneurship parts have always been there, but there is a number one scale was low. It was confined to educational institutions. We established the first technology business incubators outside the educational institutions alone. And the other day I was reading Professor Sharma making a statement that this year we will have 100 more such incubators. That's a scale in which we would like to move, and I'm very happy that that program is really going up very fast. There was mention of science communication. The other thing which comes to my mind is during those years, preceding those years, collaboration with other countries means a donor-recipient relation. We are poor and we would like to have some help in terms of science, technology, money, whatever it is. It's a donor-recipient relation. That changed completely. In the 90s, we said, no, we are no longer interested in donor-recipient relationship. We will work on equal partnership. Whether it is the United States or France or Russia or any one of those countries, developed countries, it was equal sharing. We put in the money, you put in the money. We are interested in the program, you are interested in the program. There is an overlap of interest, and our scientists and your scientists will work. We will share the IP. IP will not belong to only to you or to me. It will be shared by us. This is a major change in our international relations. It also gave us the confidence to participate in international mega science projects like CERN, mega technology projects like ITER, right? We have never heard that kind of investment by India in futuristic projects, which we did. And our scientists have delivered. You must have seen ITER, the first step of the cryostat. The entire components were made in India, moved over to the site, and they are already under construction. Right. So it gave us a new confidence that we are ready to compete with you. We are ready to share our successes. We are ready to take the risk, but we are not going to go to you with a hand for please help us. No, that's not the spirit in which we will cooperate in science and technology. Sharmaji mentioned about the building. Yes, the DST building as it exists today was a leftover of the PL 480 build periods. But I'm very glad that we will be moved out of it and DST will be in a building of its own. This sort of reflects the spirit of DST today. And I will have one thought which we have not still committed, which we have not progressed in my before I conclude. You know, the number of R&D personnel in this country per billion population is still far below that of the developed countries. We are even below that in China. China has 4 or 5 times more number of R&D professionals per million population as compared to India. This cannot go on. We must have enough number of scientists, enough number of technologies, enough number of entrepreneurs, which is consistent with our population. After all, we are a country of 1.3 billion people. And our R&D efforts, R&D manpower, R&D investments, everything should be proportional to that number, which it is not. And it has been shown by many countries before. If you invest, you get back the return. There are always a feel, but we don't have enough money. No, it is putting the cart before the horse. You invest, you will get the money for the next investment. China has shown it. Other countries like Korea has shown it. Many other countries have shown it. And I think we should move into that. Our target should be, we are not going to have a small number of people per million population. We will have a number which is consistent with our population. Of course, COVID-19 has shown us that our technological strengths come up to life and deliver when there is a need. I still remember 20 years before, DST supported a program to handle plastic waste and hospital waste using plasma incineration technologies. We had put some instruments, some units in Andaman, some units in the Himalayan areas where there was a lot of plastic and we have to get rid of them. We use this technology to part of them. Today, the technology is certified for hospital waste. COVID-19 has said very clearly that if you do not handle hospital waste properly, we are going to be in more trouble. Unfortunately, we don't have a national program to handle hospital waste. In fact, we don't have a national program to handle waste, whether it is municipal waste, whether it is municipal water, which wastewater. The technologies for handling these things exist. We have a major stake in it. If you do not handle it properly, we will be laying down invitations to disasters like COVID-19. We have the technologies already developed, most of them supported by DST or other agencies. It doesn't matter who supported it, but we have not implemented as a national program. So we have to set aside national priorities and set a roadmap and do it. We can do it. My experience in DST and subsequently what I've been seeing in the country, my bottom line is, yes, we can do it, we can deliver it, but we will have to do it. We have to start moving. So already I see a lot of changes which are taking place, and this will take us forward also in those directions. I will stop here, and I thank Professor Sharma for giving me this opportunity to share some of my thoughts of my days in DST and subsequently my days outside DST as suspected. Thank you very much.
थैंक यू सर, आपने नए भारत की और नए डीएसटी को परिभाषित किया और आपने जो बताया रोड मैप, आई थिंक प्रोफेसर शर्मा had already answered that. In fact, he had said that we are getting real and taking science to schools and colleges. Unfortunately, we have been a little hampered by the COVID pandemic. Otherwise, the time, the scale, and the way the DST has compressed timelines to take this endeavor forward, this vision of yours forward is again phenomenal. And on that note, I request now Dr. T. Ramasamy to please take us on a nostalgia trip and share his thoughts with us. Thank you, sir.
Very good morning, Nidhi. Very good morning to all of you. Of course, as was pointed out, it's a sharing of a memory lane. And I see some friends of mine from a long distance, and this occasion has made it even more, let me say, nostalgic and emotional. As someone who had been part of this country's changing India in the science concept for many years, I would like to look at DST in the larger aspect of things and look at DST alone. We're looking at the public policy support for the Indian government to Indian science. That's always been total. Even before DST was formed, this commitment of the country to invest into science was being total. India is one of the few countries, as early as 1958, talked about scientific policy resolution for a developing country. Of course, it was 1971 when, 3rd of May, they decided to have a Department of Science and Technology. India is the only country which has in its constitutional responsibility for citizens scientific temper. So the investment of the Indian government and Indian civilization, if I'm going to use the terminology civilization, to science has been completely there. So the Department of Science and Technology's role was in a way carved out already through a constitutional process and the kind of commitments that the society, governments, successive governments have shown. But when in 1971, when India set up this Department of Science and Technology, I would say that it was a small budget, some 4 crores or something. So it's a catalyst. I remember being talked to on the 4th of May 2006. It was a day after the foundation day of the department. And I was asked what DST would differ. How would it change in the 2006 journey? I said, if you're a catalyst as a chemist, you know it's reactive. It's also non-participative. The Department of Science and Technology will have to change its character from this reactive state to proactive state, from non-participative to participative state. See, it's not about how many different things that we have done, but lots of different things have been done in manners which are different, and it mattered to this country all along. And I am mightily pleased that in the journey of 50 years, India has seen the Indian science has come of ages, and I am very happy when Dr. Sharma pointed out that in a number of publications we have moved up the international ranking systems. Long ago, it was 15th. Now we are looking at in the top 5. So fundamentally, what Indian science has shown is that if you invest, you do give return to this country. Some of us who have been part of this panel belong to a generation of scientists who did not have the kinds of support system that is available to a scientist today. That has happened because of India's support to science and Department of Science and Technology playing the role of a sheet anchor. I remember the day when I had to speak for the 11th plan of India in DST's investment. I said DST is like air. The essentiality of it is recognized by its absence. If we don't have oxygen, we drop dead. But we never thank oxygen. Department of Science and Technology has played the role of the pranavayu, or the oxygen for the Indian science system all along. And I'm not speaking only from the point of view as somebody who served as secretary. Even the scientists working in this country, all of us know the Department of Science and Technology was essentially an advocacy unit of the scientists within the government. I'm very happy that in the last 50 years, lots of good things are happening. I congratulate Dr. Sharma for taking the Department of Science and Technology to the newer aspects of development process in the country. Ultimately, a nation invests into science for improving the welfare of citizens. We must all remember that. It is not that the science to be celebrated by scientists. Science to be celebrated citizens of the country is very important. And in this, one must say that compared to many other countries which have gone into what we call a high resource intense programs, they have put a lot of money, they got a lot of things, fine. But you go back and ask this question. If American investment into per scientist were to happen, per scientist, investment of, let's say, $332,000 per scientist, and that had to supply a global population 7.5 billion. The total investment of the world per year should be $9.3 trillion. Today's global investment is $1.8 trillion. What we are talking about today, if the so-called American investments or even the Chinese investments per scientist and the number of scientists were to happen, if you have to have a 7.5 billion population be served by science and scientific research, the global investments that are happening today on purchase power parity terms is at least 40%, 50% lower than necessary. Now, why am I presenting this? The Ministry of Science and Technology, as led by Dr. Sharma today and Dr. Vijayaraghavan today, have a need to look at this opportunity that India presents to give a completely a new S&T policy framework where there's a low resource setting. Is not a disadvantage, it is an advantage for increasing the scientific results reaching unserved, underserved people of the world. And that all that can happen if Department of Science and Technology were to now look at the manners of advocacy for right-sizing the full-time equivalent scientists of this million population. My predecessor, Dr. Ramamurthy, pointed out very strongly that we have far fewer scientists than what we need to serve this country. But it is an opportunity for us when the 2020 SGIP is being formulated, that we need to have a right size. What is the size of the number of science full-time equivalent for serving the Indian population necessary? The next question here, scientists have to also undergo some transformation. They cannot think the responsibility of DST is to make money available for them to do what they want to do. DST has played a role in presenting to the government what is science good for. What is good for science has been spoken about before. But today, we need to go back and ask, what is science good for? What is good for science? We have done. But what is science good for is a question. And therefore, I believe that the new vision that the department will need to do is to really make the Indian science be celebrated by the citizens of this country, not just the scientists of the country alone. And we have published, publication is important, technology is important, we have to be self-reliant. Above all, if you were to go back and ask a common man in the city, in the streets of Delhi, how would that person relate the life of that system to the Indian science contribution? It'll be something in nondescript. They say, I've done a great job. I think scientists also have to be told that by the Department of Science and Technology that we should become a prime mover in the mindset of India, that we are there for citizens of the country. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir. There is a little lag. I'm sorry about that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for your very, very inspiring words. Like you said, we are indeed catalyzing change, and we are looking at dialogue and bringing in more awareness and taking this institution to greater and newer heights. आपने एक बात कही और मुझे याद आई आत्मनिर्भर भारत की. A poet once said, and he was a Victorian poet, mind you, and one of my favorites, Robert Browning, a man's life must always reach out and be more than his grasp, or what's the heaven for? And with these lines, I now request the very Honorable Dr. K. Vijay Raghavan, Principal Scientific Advisor to the Prime Minister, Government of India, to share the key takeaways of the past 50 years and the roadmap for the future. Raghavan, sir.
Thank you very much, Nidhi. It's a great honor to be here today and speak after my eminent colleagues, Dr. Ramurthy, Dr. Ramasamy, and Dr. Ashutosh Sharma. They have covered really everything that needs to be said. Ashutosh was generous in saying that, between the three of us, we cover a huge span of DST's history, but my contribution in terms of time is only a few minutes in that span compared to the decades which the others have put in. But nevertheless, DST, even in the brief period I was there, and before and after, has always been very close to my heart, both for the extraordinary talent and professionalism of all of DST's scientists, administration, and finance people, but also because of the extraordinary impact DST has on our ecosystem. Amongst all our science agencies, and indeed amongst all our ministries, DST's reach and span and depth required in every area is so much that it is truly the agency
for transformation of India, and not through science and technology, but its impact will be enormous. There were some few important points relevant to what I will now address, which I'd like to recapitulate from what Dr. Ramaswamy said and what Dr. Ramurthy said. It is important, of course, very important to increase the amount of resources we are putting into science and technology. No question about that. And it's important to invest in cutting edge areas so that we are not left behind. All that is very true. But it is also important, as Dr. Ramurthy pointed out, that we have a certain self-confidence about what to do and where to go, rather than be stressed out about saying that we are behind in this area or that area and we need to catch up. The approach to catch up is just not a feasible one if you do a rough, even if you do a rough back of the envelope calculations of the kinds of budgets involved and the timelines involved to build the big scientific empires we see today. And therefore, the approach to catch up must be doing more for less and using intellectual capacity on how to do that. I'll come to a little later on how that can be done, but it cannot be by mere scaling in a proportionate manner to what others do. It has to be proportionate to our investment, of course. Our percentage GDP investment needs to go up substantially, but we have to see how we can wisely use those resources. In that regard, on the foundations of what Dr. Ramurthy, Dr. Ashutosh Sharma, Dr. Ramaswamy have built in terms of broad people-oriented programs, we have to see how we can go ahead. Dr. Ramaswamy pointed out another very important factor, that we need to get more for less. And if we look at all the bells and whistles of technologies and science which the West has developed, they have been developed over literally hundreds of years in a different cultural context. And therefore, we have to see whether there is room for originality in addressing similar questions of in the various themes of technology in a manner which is much more valuable for us in terms of the kinds of investment we can make. Now, I'll talk to how we can do it on this. But let me point out that in this big investment which the West has made in science and technology, in no small measure has India contributed over historical time and even in a contemporary situation. India's contribution more recently has been enormous. Our undergraduate and graduate support we give for students going abroad, paid by our citizens, is comparable to a petroleum import bill. This has led to Indian intellectuals, scientists, technologists, economists, historians, mathematicians, playing a very important role in the growth of science and technology in the West, which is good. There's nothing wrong in that. But that cannot be the only approach to our human resource, our talent development. Now, this has led to a great intellectual development in a variety of areas of science and technologies all over the world in which we have participated. But keep in mind that over time, since independence, the landscape of science and technology has changed enormously because of this. At independence and before, excellence in science and technology were random events of talented individuals coming up all over the world, and the extent of the institutions of science and technology were rather small. The footprint of science and technology were small. So talented individuals could accumulate from anywhere at the wall of excellence. Today, the wall of excellence is occupied hugely because of enormous investment over the past several decades, and that wall is dominated by the West, China, and Japan, for example. How then can we have accumulation at that wall of excellence from India is the important question. The answer to that is simple yet difficult to execute. Today, much of our science and technology funding goes to a small number of institutions supported by the central government, and a few places supported by state governments or private efforts. 90% of our students, however, go to state universities and affiliated colleges, where research is not a substantial component of thinking. Research and inquiry and analytical thinking must be a core aspect of every student, right from high school, indeed earlier, up to college and beyond. This requires investment of a certain kind, of course, enormous resources, but also enormous focus on what one does in every area: history, geography, mathematics, science, technology, chemistry, physics, biology, and so on. This massive effort on scale is different from a focused effort on developing specific areas of science and technology across the spectrum, or what the DAE does, or the DRDO, or ISRO, or DBT, or DST, and so on and so forth. So we need a big push on this of a scale very different from what is done. And that is why the National Education Policy, which has just been rolled out, proposes the National Research Foundation to have this kind of support across scale in a large way, a combination of public, private, philanthropic support, industry, to scale the effect of science and technology across the country. This is going to be a big challenge. It will take time, but it's all the more reason to start now. The second component, which we need to take on as a community, where DST has a big role, including other agencies, is again something which was highlighted by Professor Ramamurthy. He gave the example of waste. If you look around us, the situation regarding waste is something which is very frightening. The Ghazipur waste dump in Delhi is taller than the Taj Mahal and occupies about 76 or 77 acres. And there are about 100 such dumps all over the country. My colleagues and I have analyzed this, and not only are there these waste dumps, our rivers and canals are extraordinarily polluted, and our ongoing systems of collection and dealing with waste need to be fixed. So there are two components to waste: one, the legacy issue, and one, what is happening now. Technologies, of course, exist all over the world and in India. But the problem is not solely a technological one. It is one of tweaking the technology into an appropriate mechanism in each context, dealing with procurement and other bottlenecks, and having a trained set of people working to run these technologies perfectly. So in other words, this is a complicated mission. It's as complicated a mission as building and operating CERN, but in a very different context, in a very different distributed manner. It requires the same level of science, technology, and quality, and to assume that this is a low-level task would be wrong. So I would urge our agencies to work together, because this is a multi-agency, multi-ministry, state government, municipal corporation challenge. If this challenge of legacy waste can be addressed and a zero-waste structure put together, it will be absolutely extraordinary. The Prime Minister's Science, Technology and Innovation Advisory Council has taken this on as a key mission. There are other missions which we need to take up, which are analogous to what we have taken up in terms of the square kilometer array or the 30-meter telescope, or the LIGO, and so on and so forth. These are necessary and very important big missions, and they are big investments. They provide the foundations of our training for our scientists. And my only point about them is, while appreciating and seeing the great value, it is now important to increase the human footprint of these projects across the country hugely. CERN, instead of having hundreds of Indian collaborators, must have tens of thousands of Indians who are using that data. So also with the square kilometer array, when it comes up, with various telescopes, with LIGO, and so on and so forth. In other words, our effort in these areas should be not only to be, equal contributors with the modest amount of resources we put in, and training high quality, small numbers of people, but this big data which comes from these missions should be accessible to everyone through our training, so that in the top 100 high energy physicists or astronomers or astrophysicists, we have several Indians over the next few years. So this is an area for the big missions we need to. Simultaneously, our big missions coming on now to deal with these areas which we heard about. Waste is one, energy is another, our waterways are the third, and so on. These are all important scientific big time missions which we should deal with. And that's something which DST now can take the lead and make sure that all of us work together in this. The quantum mission which the DST is pushing is an example again. Even though at its peak would be a quantum computer, at its base would be technology development across the spectrum in photonics, semiconductors, lasers, and so on, and handling of data and computer science, which are essential for that mission. So these missions are not to be viewed only at the tip, at the pyramid, and what the goals are, but building capacity enormously, particularly in this 90% of our student population, where we don't have a reach. I'd like to end by pointing out the importance of studying our ecosystem. For many, many years, epidemiologists, public health people have been warning about exactly this kind of a pandemic. So this pandemic is no surprise at all. There has been a tendency, however, amongst those who look from an economic perspective, as the costs of an investment of protection against a potential pandemic are seen as potentially wasteful expenditure. In other words, you have an argument among finance people across the world that the safety belt in a car is not necessary because you don't need it very often. Similarly, shock absorbers may not be necessary because a bumpy road is not there very often, and so on and so forth. Airbags are not necessary, safety locks are not necessary. And then you have a pared down motor car which is functional but is not prepared for contingency, small and big. It's important to remember that environmental and health catastrophes of the kind we have seen will become more and more frequent. There are two reasons for that. Any low probability event of close contact between animals and humans spilling over to a disease will inevitably happen if you do one of two things or do both. Given enough time, a low probability event will happen. Given enough proximity and intensity of proximity, a low probability event will happen with high probability. We have increased the proximity of contact and intensity of contact between humans and animals to such an extent that such pandemics will only happen again and again. There are some general solutions to deal with them that we have learned from this pandemic. Those must be implemented on scale. They involve digital contact tracing on scale, which will be useful for any pandemic, and mechanisms of understanding the physical basis of communication of different diseases and therefore isolation of different forms. These two will give digital space and non-pharmaceutical intervention space while we deal with future pandemics, in addition to cleaning up our environment, which is important. The other aspect of future disasters relate to climate change. All too often, we think that those disasters will come in terms of only rising sea levels or melting glaciers, altered climatic conditions, and so on. Yes, indeed, those will happen along with increasing temperature. The consequences on human health of those will be enormous. We live every day with bacteria and viruses and other kinds of bugs, which today are harmless to us. In them, there are genes which potentially, if when activated, can invade other tissues and cause very severe damage. Those silent genes are easily activated by changes in external conditions, much more so than external conditions affect us. The example I'd like to give is about which I've given several times, is the Saiga antelope in Kazakhstan. It had commensal bacteria in its nasal passages, which didn't no harm, but a 1.5 degree increase in summer temperature made these bacteria invasive and caused sepsis and killed a very large number of these animals. In other words, these kinds of genetic environmental switches can cause severe damage, and therefore a fundamental understanding of ecology, evolutionary biology, climate change, and indeed all of science is important. So I'd like to end by saying we have many known and potential challenges from basic to applied science which we have to address. But if you have to have the capability of addressing challenges which are unknown to us at this time, the only way is by spreading the footprint of science and technology and critical thinking, so that when unknown unknowns hit us, we are able to be truly innovative and smart and deal with them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Those were indeed very, very thought-provoking and inspiring words. You spoke about pandemics, sir, and we cannot really wish away these pandemics, but we have to take them head on. You have been an institution builder, and you spoke about the footprint and the large verticals that you mentioned. I'm amazed that we're all looking at so much progress in the years to come. And it reminded me of the lines, the word footprint. I must share them with you. Lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime and departing, leave behind us footprints in the sands of time. And I'm sure we'll be scripting history here at the DST or ise aur behtar banayenge. I now request Professor Ashutosh Sharma, sir, to please take up a few questions that are flashing on our screens, Q&A from the audience. Dr. Raghavan, sir, do I have your permission to start the questions, please?
Yeah, certainly. And let me just say that the flux of experience and wisdom passing through this last half an hour has been so exceptional, so extraordinary indeed. And so that I would, of course, request all the three people here, as well as Professor Ramarao, to continue to supply us advice for going forward on many different things that we discussed, all of them very compelling points that have come across. So, okay,
So one
what's
question
the
has come
question
up
you
from
got?
Abhilash Pani of Odisha. He says, how could the Department of Science and Technology inspire Gen Next students and children of the schools and colleges to take more interest? Basically, how we can get the magic across. And he's also asked about the program Inspire, sir.
Yeah, so Dr. Ramasamy is the architect of that program, and so we would ask him
Well,
to respond to it.
sir, thank you, Sosh. I was only an instrument and not an architect, but I'm very happy that there's a question on the manner in which the talent supply of this country can be harnessed to pursue science and research, undertake research as a career. To the best of my knowledge, Inspire is some program which has been named as, actually, if you look at it in terms of acronym, it says Inspire, but innovation in science pursuit for inspired research. It talked about research being inspired and science being a pursuit, not a job. I mean, not a career. Science is inspired was truly science as a pursuit and research as inspired. I'm very happy in the last several years, because it started in 2008. I understand the number of people who have benefited by it is huge. In terms of number, we are talking about 2 million people plus. I'm aware that when this was commissioned, this project was commissioned, they were saying that talented people were rather spending energy and time to manage innovations than create innovations. How to attract them to do research, innovation itself, that was an issue. I understand something like 86,000 young people were top 1% performers of their respective class boards actually undertook this fellowship scheme to become a scientist. And there's even a class of 71 in Kumar All the 71 was Inspire awardees. Therefore, my personal feeling will be the Inspire was like a seed, so being a sapling being given some for small amount of energy and food. But predominantly, the science community of India has own responsibility of nourishing people, mentoring people. The most important part is mentoring people into the system. And I don't think today people talk about talented people not being attracted to science, and they may need to have further levels of investments, further levels of mentoring support systems. But I think Inspire has begun well, and I must compliment one thing. There are very few times when we do something and the Americans copy us. It turns out after we started it Inspire, National Science Foundation started Inspire, and that N in that Inspire was National Science Foundation. So Inspire was in that sense a process which created upwelling, and I hope that Ashok Sharma's care will take them to really contribute to the country's development. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I hope, Abhilash, you got your answer. Abhilash Pani of Odisha. Our next question has come from Sara Smriti from Delhi, who's written to ask us what role does DST play in societal development and the perspective of innovation and technology at the state level. Ashutosh sir, if you can take this. And also, she's asking if there are any grants given for making apps. If so, where to inquire?
Yeah, so let me first say conclude about the Inspire program that this has inspired not only our students and scientists, but indeed inspired the global community, including the National Science Foundation. So has had a very tremendous impact. I have met thousands, hundreds of these people and addressed them and interacted with them. It has had actually a very profound influence on each of these lives going forward in the journey of science. Now, the second point was let me also complete the story about Inspire journey. Now, Inspire, so it takes you all the way from school to college to PhD and preparation for faculty jobs. One of the things that have been missing in our ecosystem is the lack of a national level program in postdoctoral fellowships in great numbers because there is a very huge gap after PhD. That the point is, if you don't get a job right after PhD, which is nearly impossible in academia, etc., then a whole lot of people are looking for opportunities elsewhere. And so now that there is a program called National Postdoctoral Fellowship, which just addresses that little gap between PhD and a scientist. There are about 3,000 postdoctoral fellows in the country supported by Science and Engineering Research Board. So you take all the top people coming out of PhD pipeline who are preparing themselves for a career in science and R&D and D and so on. So that gap has been indeed been filled quite well at the moment. The question was about the societal impact of science and technology, and especially going to states. This has indeed been a huge question, and in fact, yesterday, Minister of Science and Technology, who is also Minister of Health and Family Welfare and Earth Sciences, in fact, we are planning to have a meeting tomorrow with all the ministers of science technology from different states. And in fact, the idea is, well, how do we connect even more strongly our science and technology with the states? It's fairly clear that every state has local problems that are looking for solutions through science, technology, and innovation. Not India is a diverse country. So while we do theory of relativity and quantum mechanics, at the same time we also do solve problems which are of local nature. So indeed, the whole idea, and there would be a big chapter in the science technology policy on this, is how do we work more closely, more strongly in the partnership mode with the states. There are connects now, and those connects need to be scaled up fully to bring in the true sense of ownership and partnership with the states. Now it happens through other mechanisms. Of course, DST's support for science and technology is agnostic to who is asking for it, as long as they are relevant as long as they are competitive. So a whole lot of funding does go to state, organizations, universities, their labs, and so on. And of course, that we seek solutions which would be applicable to the states. There are state S&T councils. This has been a mechanism which has been in place for a very long time. So now we are also making sure that the connect of the state councils to the state government is also strong. So this is not just connect of DST with the state councils, which could be strong, but also the connect of state S&T councils to the state government as an intermediate stakeholders of this process. So I think we people are fully, understanding of the dimensions of this problem, and then how do we need to take it forward. And I think that the policy coming up now would provide some comprehensive solutions to this problem as well. Of course, there is also a connect with the society at large. So that is through different programs of DST. So a whole lot of that happens through NGOs, that happens through state machinery, and all of that provides another pathway of connect to working with the states. One of the questions that I'm sure somebody is asking you, and we are often asked, and this was touched upon also by Dr. Ramamurthy and Dr. Ramaswamy, and indeed Dr. Vijay Raghavan. The problem is, look, when we are so good at science and technology, we got deep strengths, right? Which is reflected, for example, in our being number three in the world in number of scientific publications. So the question, obvious question, which is a very relevant questions, if we would, is how come we don't see that strength reflected in our industry? We import whole lot of technology, right? Whether it's biomedical instruments, whether it is anything, right? We do that. So now with this thing about Atmanirbhar Bharat, clearly, what is it that we are missing? So while we have deep strengths in science and technology, why is it that we don't see it in action all the time, right around me? And it's a very valid question, if you would. Only issue is that we there was another thing which was pointed out, that number of scientists per million per capita are rather small in India compared to its neighbors and other people. Actually, these two problems are very hugely interrelated. So I would, ask this to all the people here, former secretaries of DST,
Sir,
that if we were to increase, for example, the number of our PhD students who then become scientists and increase the per capita, right? It's a very curious situation. See that the industry has to participate in making use of knowledge that we create. Indeed, to absorb all these
I think
PhD.
there is a bit of lag. I'm very sorry about that, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I stop there since there's a leg. Let's shake a leg or two and go ahead with that, right? So we were doing that. Anyway, I've been speaking too much. So I would just very quickly, pose the question, saying that look, coming from the industry side, not coming from academic side or side of academia, how do we fix their participation in R&D and D and to make use of knowledge and structures that we already have? And that indeed would mean that we can create more PhD students who would actually find job in our industrial knowledge system. That's a question I'm asking on behalf of the entire scientific community and indeed the entire nation. So, Professor Ramamurthy, perhaps could start on that.
I I don't have a ready-made answer for this. Point is a question of mutual confidence. If you ask an industrialist, he will say, okay, the scientific community will give halfway through and then we give up. I remember one case, there was a process, chemical process, which was from a government institution, and there was a huge industrial opportunity. Industry came to Technology Development Board, we gave the money, when they set up the project, and it was inaugurated by me. And then they said that the efficiency, which was supposed to be about 90 plus percentage, is not more than 75, which is not financially viable. Now, what do I do? I said, no, go back to the institution and tell them your lab scale it is 95, but in the industrial scale it is only 75. What should we do? We went back to the institution, and then there was a fight between the scientists and the director in the institution. And you know what happened? So this fellow had to close the the industry. When we closed the industry, the technology development board was on him to get back the money from him. And for almost 3 years, he was running from liar to liar to get out of that mess, right? Now, in other words, every component of this chain had some weakness or other. That is what we have to correct. Now we understand, we try our best, but there is no magic solution. I think that is where our problem is. We are making progress in that. We will continue to make progress, but not fast enough. We have to make it faster.
Perhaps Dr. Ramasamy has some to contribute.
Right. Thank you, Stosh. Unlike my predecessors who came from defense departments, who had the protection of the government, who invested in it, and they made technology their users. So by the government, for the government, to the government, I came from a Chamda Institute, Leather Institute. Remember, here, when people talk about this problem, I did not see it as a problem. Because at the time when I came to the Department of Science and Technology, I was the director of the Leather Research Institute, and 48% of my money came from industry. And that was not for love of your work. If industry were to put money into research, the research has to provide affordable and viable solutions. As short of that, you cannot wish people to invest. It turned out that the Central Leather Research Institute was in a position to provide viable on-ground solutions to the problems. And therefore, as somebody, if I had continued along that institute, in fact, there was a time I could have taken that institute completely out of the government funding. There was no need for a government funding as far as that institute was concerned. But what happens is, in our peer review system, we look at some of these as if not great science. Science is to be not valued only from what Vijay talked about, the wall of excellence. There is a question of relevance. There is a question of sustenance. The relevance and sustenance is not built into the ethos of scientific education in this country, scientific research in this country, and our public institutions in research do not promote that. Fundamentally, the idea of the Prime Minister's doctoral fellowship that we established in the department was essentially bridge that lack of trust that prevails between industry and the research in this country. There's the absence of a social capital, the trust between the scientists and the industry. That was possible to create a system where the project not to be evaluated for its excellence. Project in Prime Minister Doctor Fellowship was evaluated for the relevance of the industry. And there has the choice of the project itself is not to be valued whether you can publish a paper, whether or a patent. It's about whether it's going to solve a problem. So primarily, Astosh, I think we need to see the cultural change. A cultural change in which the scientists and the industry people respect each other, trust each other. And this technology development board, which my predecessor talked about, was supposed to be a soft money. It is supposed to be a process where risk of failure of technology is covered, risk of enterprise is covered. But On the other hand, we convert that also into another watchdog. If technology development board, 70% of the projects succeeded, we don't worry about the 70% which succeeded. We talked about 30% which failed and put that fellows who have done the technology development board, mistakes in this country, if it is going to be punished. If the risk is not to the ecosystem, please forget this. This will not happen. The concept of audit for the sake of financial process rather than the value is a mistake. As far as the technology, that particular company that Ramamurthy spoke about, I think it is important that we need to bring about a certain cultural change in our mindset about not punishing a failure of a technology. Thank you.
I completely agree
Yeah.
with Ramasamy on this. I completely agree with Ramasamy on this. We have this weakness. We forget the 70% success and we try to do the 30% micromanagement and analysis. And more importantly, we have lost our capability to distinguish fraud from a failure in scientific research and a failure in the marketplace. Market cannot be always predicted, and there could be failure, but then you don't penalize the fellow who tried it. You only penalize fellow who was deliberately doing a fraud. We have lost our capacity to that, or no, we never had the capacity to do that. And I think that is what that's extremely important. See, Ramasamy is an exception. He was the scientist. He was also the director of the institute. He was also part of the industry. It doesn't happen all the time, right? And that's a chance.
But Ramamurthy, I
frank
was very lucky not to have the government support completely for doing science.
Indeed, very frank and fair views, and they would go a long way in factoring in as to how we run our business in the future. Now, there's one more aspect of this problem. One aspect is industry and academia and government working together. Another aspect is industry itself developing a knowledge ecosystem which is valued for their growth and profit. And this part is very important because you see, globally, about 10% PhDs find a job directly in academia or some government related structure. So therefore, you ask yourself, if you were to increase number of scientists, if you were to increase number of PhD student of relevance and quality, as well as their absorption in the industry, I think this is very critical. So how does industry going to be on board for this knowledge sector, looking at the value that it brings to them? I mean, even independent of interaction with the government or interaction with the academia, right? So I think that I posed this question. Now I think we are nearly at the end, and this is a question I'm posing on behalf of all the listeners and people that ask us to Professor Vijay Raghavan.
Thank you very much. I think Dr. Ramasamy and Dr. Ramamurthy have covered the critical aspects of what is needed for collaboration. You raised another matter about industry itself investing in research for industry's benefit, as distinct from collaborative problem solving. The challenge is a simple one. You look at the levels of investment by the Googles or the GEs of the world in R&D. Their R&D investment, each of them, exceeds that of the entire US National Science Foundation. So when we're talking about industry having a hunger for investment, it is not merely, in terms of a cultural change, which is important. It has the same challenges which academic investment in R&D has in how can you invest, and industry has capital. Industry doesn't have risk capital. And therefore, how does one manage against this huge risk in a globally competitive world? It's much more pressing a question for industry than for academia, which has the luxury of not having a deadline in terms of reaching a certain level of success. In my view, there is a solution, and that solution is being explored today by multiple science agencies. And that is actually a partnership with government agencies, even in industry oriented research. We should break the norms of funding so that government can more liberally fund research, risk research in industry in multiple ways. It is already doing that in some areas, such as in biotech and vaccine development. This needs to be scaled enormously. Secondly, the amount of resources in our academic research ecosystems, in our national labs, has three components which industry should partner in terms of contributing costs for finding solutions. These three components which our national labs and universities have are intellectual power, infrastructure, and land. These three components, if they come as their contribution to a partnership, industry brings in another third, government brings up the third component, then we can take on challenging new problems which are both relevant as well as competitive globally. So it requires a new mindset in the ways we function, and I completely agree that entire mindset in terms of what one accounts for in terms of outcomes should move in that direction rather than what accounts for in terms of every rupee spent and what is the output. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's a very deep insight indeed. Nidhi ji, is there any other burning question that you
Yes,
feel
sir.
that
Sir, there is one
we could address
question.
now?
Yes, sir.
I
There
think,
is just one last question,
yeah,
sir,
yeah, yeah. Go
which
ahead.
is being asked by everybody, and I think it's for all of you. I'm so sorry because of internet connectivity, something happened and there was a lag on my side. I apologize for that. This last question comes from a bunch of girls from Christ University, Bangalore, and they are right now in the hostel, sir, during these pandemic times. Kavita, Rashi, Mithila, all these have been asking, and they're all asking as in to know asking. And I think I would request Dr. Raghavan sir to answer this question. They're saying, are we prepared for another pandemic, if at all? And when can we start, looking beyond the new normal? Because the new normal is certainly not our normal. Exactly the way they've sent the question, I'm asking this to you, sir. So these are a bunch of teenagers who want to know when they can start going out and whether there is another pandemic coming. And I think since you spoke about that, it is only right to ask you.
Thank you very much. The answer is simple. That, but yet it's as always, the solution is more difficult to implement. I'll be very brief. There are three kinds of interventions which will help hugely. One is a non-pharmaceutical one, and these are distancing and having masks. These are important now, and they are important for any pandemic. These are non-pharmaceutical interventions of various kinds, how you deal with your workplace and so on. And a huge amount of relatively normal activity can be taken place if most people take precautions. We can actually crunch this pandemic entirely if most people take these non pharmaceutical precautions. If you then slip up, then it spreads. So, this is a huge community responsibility which we can do for this and for any pandemic. The second point are pharmaceutical interventions. Pharmaceutical interventions are those I'm talking about, drugs and vaccines together. Drugs are easier to develop, but more difficult to develop for viruses in a specific manner. They have started coming for late stage illnesses. They will come for early stage illnesses also. They will not be very specific. They will have more side effects. And we don't know how we will luck out. It's very difficult to make drugs against specific viruses because the virus uses our machinery to replicate. And therefore, a drug will also affect our machinery. And when you give a preventive drug to a healthy person, side effects are not on. The same thing holds for vaccines. Vaccines are much more effective, but much harder to develop. And they're much more specific. They give us the true exit from the pandemic. Vaccines normally take 10 years to make and hundreds of millions of dollars. Today, the world is trying to make it in 1 year for billions of dollars. It looks like so far that those efforts will be successful. So the vaccine exit will come late this year and early next year. Given the huge challenges in vaccine distribution, it will take over a year to distribute the vaccines to everyone. Till then, one needs to increase the level of normal life, taking the first set of precautions, which are difficult, particularly for the young, but this is something which we can do, and that will give us a safe exit from this. And that's the kind of behavior which will give us an exit from any pandemic. Thank you.
So that goes as an answer to all your questions, friends. And you have to stay safe during pandemic times, is what Dr. Raghavan has been saying. And increase workout with your immunology and take precautions in the new normal. And hopefully, we'll be back to brighter times, better times. And of course, as he also said, we at DST and the Ministry of Health are trying to compressed timelines, and it's not easy to make a vaccine. It's not magic. And on that note, we come to an end of this Q&A session. I now request Dr. Nakul Parashar sir, Director Vigyan Prasar, to please present the vote of thanks.
Nidhi ji, if I may just very quickly say something in a lighter vein, because there's a bunch of teenagers, as you said, or young people. You see, in the 60s and 70s, there was a famous saying. It said, "Only way out is in." So this is also part of new normal. They say, when will we be out? You see, out. This is a great time to cultivate the inner strengths as well. That we are usually not focused on what is called the normal times. And I think this is a time of great growth potential as well. And so I can explain the meaning of all this if I had more time, but suffice it to say that it offers new opportunities for growth.
Absolutely. As you said, we need to look inwards. I now request Dr. Nakul Parashar sir, Director Vigyan Prasar, to present his vote of thanks. Sir.
You are muted, Nakul ji.
Right. On behalf of NCSTC and Vigyan Prasar, I thank all our esteemed panelists for taking out time to start the DST Golden Jubilee Discourse Series. Thank you very much, sir. I would also like to thank all of you to have joined this webinar and look forward to your participation in our forthcoming webinars and lectures. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And I think the entire credit for this wonderful inaugural goes to you and your team, Nakul sir, and more power to you. And on that note, necessity is the mother of invention, friends, and we have invented quite a few solutions for India. Thank you all for having joined us on this, the auspicious occasion of Golden Jubilee of the Department of Science and Technology, and the very best to you in all your future endeavors. Let us together, you and I, promote science and technology at the state, district, and village levels for grassroots development. Let us apply science and technology in every aspect of our life. Let us get real and take it to the next. हम उम्मीद करते हैं और दुआ करते हैं कि डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ साइंस एंड टेक्नोलॉजी का भविष्य महफूज हो, सुंदर हो, रोशन हो, और इसमें आप और हम बराबरी के हिस्सेदार हों. With this, we come to an end of today's inaugural program. And as we formally sign off today and bring the inaugural ceremony to an end, I request all of you to please rise, to please stand up for the national anthem. Jai Hind.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मागे गाहे तव जय गाथा जनगण मङ्गलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे